Hello, my name is Miranda from the Australian Centre for Education and Training, also known as ACET-Global, and today I will be talking a little bit about the importance of education and the environment. ACET-Global is an education consultancy aiming to transform businesses, individuals and communities through education. If you'd like to learn more about what we do and why, take a look at the short introductory webinar on our website. In this presentation today, I will be presenting some research undertaken in one project of our Corporate Social Responsibility program. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live. Here in our Melbourne office, that is the Boonwurrung and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. We recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community, and we pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. So a little bit about me. As I said, I'm Miranda. I'm a business relations officer here at ACET-Global. In university, I studied international relations and sociology with a particular interest in environmental policy, management and communication. Some of my hobbies include sport, camping, cooking and travel. This is Daniela. She may be speaking another day, so I'll introduce her briefly now. She's also a business relations officer here at ACET-Global, as well as a CSR project supervisor. In university, she studied environmental science and has a particular interest in community engagement and education. Her hobbies include dance, art, and camping. So today, I will be talking specifically about one CSR project of ACET-Global, which is the Global Climate Action Project, or GCAP. Within the GCAP, ACET-Global aims to research and summarise key information about climate change and how we can all work together to address the climate crisis through various solutions. In this presentation, I will go through some of this key research. We will first look briefly at what is climate change, how severe it is, why this is an issue, and what are the impacts. Then we will look briefly at the current climate action or inaction within Australia, before discussing some key solutions for mitigating climate change across different levels of society. So, what is the problem? What is climate change? The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's 2021 report demonstrates the severity of climate change now. The IPCC found evidence that the Earth's global temperature has risen approximately 1.7 degrees Celsius since between 1850 and 1900. Or around the time of the start of industrialization. This global warming is driven largely by the release of greenhouse gases, which are absorbed into the Earth's atmosphere and oceans. This in turn has caused widespread, rapid changes in the atmosphere, ocean and biosphere, which is known as climate change. The burning of fossil fuels, for example, coal and gas, which are used to power much of our society today, is the main cause of the release of greenhouse gas emissions. So therefore we know that it has been the actions of humans and industrialization which has caused global warming of this extent, something that's called anthropogenic climate change. So why is a change in climate significant? What are the impacts of global temperature increase? Well, changes in the climate have massively damaging and harmful effects on the environment. The IPCC has found that rising temperatures will cause more severe and more frequent extreme weather events. Warming oceans will cause ice caps to melt and sea levels to rise, as well as ocean acidification. The changes will disrupt natural ecosystems and therefore the health of flora and fauna and contribute to biodiversity loss and animal extinction. Because of our natural climate here in Australia, we are particularly susceptible to these impacts. We've already seen these effects playing out, for example, through the unprecedented bushfires of summer 2019 to 2020 and the floods in New South Wales this year. The impacts of climate change, however, do not stop at the environment. There are many huge social and economic costs which ultimately affect all areas of life. For one example, sea level rise threatens the livelihoods of coastal populations. In the future, this is predicted to cause widespread displacement and migration of those populations, which in turn puts economic pressure on receiving countries. These social and economic impacts of climate change and the cost of dealing with them hinders the progression of many of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. For example, shrinking agricultural productivity caused by damaging weather events directly challenges SDG 1, eradicating poverty, and SDG 2, ending world hunger. As such, immediate action on climate change is imperative for protecting our future. So, what needs to be done? What is climate action? Well, climate action is ultimately about aiming to limit global average temperature rise to well below 2 degrees Celsius in order to minimize and mitigate these impacts of climate change. To do this, we must limit greenhouse gas emissions by 3 main ways. 1, using energy more efficiently. 2, using cleaner energy. And 3, managing our natural resources more effectively. However, climate action like this can be a contentious topic, especially in political arenas. This is because oftentimes climate action is considered unproductive, costly, or a hindrance to economic development. But this is not the case. Climate action not only has obvious environmental benefits by mitigating and minimizing the threats discussed before, but it also provides unique opportunities to stimulate the economy and society. So, what are some of these benefits? Well, economically, foreign and local investment into green development would induce innovation that is expected to see green technology and green processes created, which will actually improve efficiency of industries and stimulate further economic activity. At the same time, investment into green development and climate-conscious industries will create many high and low-skilled jobs, which in turn will increase disposable incomes and tax revenue. Socially, more jobs will be created than lost, leading to reliable, well-paying employment that relieves pressure on poverty. Energy prices will rise in the short term, however, will be considerably cheaper in the long term, leading to higher disposable incomes. And improved health outcomes will be greater as less people are burdened by the effects of pollution. So let's look at some case studies. Recent climate action policy initiatives from governments across the globe, including these, demonstrate these societal and economic benefits. So for one, the prevalence and success of solar photovoltaic energy production here in Australia is a really good example. Currently, Australia has the highest uptake of solar globally, with around 30% of homes with rooftop solar panels. This has supported a 40 to 60% drop in the price of solar energy over the past 10 years, helping Australians to save their money on energy. This demand has supported the economy too, with almost 18,000 people employed in the solar photovoltaic sector, and the Climate Council Australia proposed that under a 50% renewable electricity scenario, 28,000 new jobs could be created by 2030, with around half of these jobs in the solar sector. Another great example is the Renew program in London. This was a climate action initiative which worked to reduce household energy consumption and therefore carbon emissions. Over 103,000 homes and buildings were retrofitted with green technology. This included things like wall insulation, double glazing windows, draft proofing floors, and upgrading heating systems. As a result, 46,000 tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions are reduced each year, and the program generated $16.1 million in energy savings and created 2,100 jobs. Finally, in Rio, the expansion of the bus rapid transport network over the last decade, with 120 kilometres of new bus routes and a 45% increase of the number of bus trips, has saved 107,000 tonnes of greenhouse gases from being emitted, while also successfully increased the share of public transport users, cut travel times, and helped create a 20% drop in road fatalities in the city. So, with these benefits in mind, what is Australia's climate action response? Well, on an international level, Australia has been a part of key climate summits, including, notably, in Paris in 2015, where Australia agreed to an emissions reduction target of 26 to 28% below 2005 levels by 2030, in order to help reach the combined goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. However, on a national level, Australia has had minimal significant climate action. And this is largely because climate policies have been impacted by politics and the vested interests of the large coal and gas mining sector, which contributes greatly to Australia's economy, and also which often provides political donations to the Liberal and Labor parties. A prime example of this politicisation of climate action in Australia was when the Gillard government introduced the Clean Energy Act of 2011. This policy introduced a carbon pricing scheme that aimed to put a cap on greenhouse gas emissions from large polluters to promote the use of clean energy. However, after a scare campaign describing the policy as a carbon tax, which would cost everyday Australians thousands of dollars, the Abbott government repealed the act in 2014. From then on, characterising the past and current inaction of the federal government on climate issues. Most recently, however, in October 2021, the Morrison government announced a net zero emissions target for 2050. The plan to reach the target is a technology-led approach, which largely involves funding into areas such as electric vehicle uptake and carbon capture, use and storage. Australia is among the highest CO2 emitters per capita in the world. However, we are far behind much of the world in climate action. The international body Climate Action Tracker has labelled Australia's climate action as highly insufficient. The CAT deemed Australia's policies, actions, targets, and climate funding as insufficient to avoiding a 3-degree global temperature rise. Now, this analysis was last updated in September 2021, so before the 2025 net zero target was announced. Yet the recent roadmap to a net zero target by 2015 has been strongly criticised as unambitious for relying on technologies which do not yet exist and for not including any plans to phase out coal. In February 2022, following the release of the 6th IPCC report, the Climate Council concluded that Australia should aim to reduce its emissions by 75% below 2005 levels by 2030 and to achieve net zero emissions by 2035 rather than 2050 in order to appropriately address the rate of climate change now. So let's move on. How can we work to achieve net zero emissions? What are the key solutions? As mentioned previously, large-scale climate action is primarily about reducing greenhouse gas emissions by finding cleaner, more efficient and more sustainable energy sources. The main way to do so is by transitioning to renewable energy sources. These sources include solar, wind, geothermal, hydropower, and biomass. Unlike non-renewable energy, these energy sources release minimal to no greenhouse gas emissions and therefore do not contribute to global warming. Additional benefits include improved air quality, which supports public health, and an inexhaustible supply of power. Overall, 27% of Australia's electricity generated now comes from renewable energy. However, Australia has a unique position to be a world leader, having unrivaled potential in renewable energy, especially solar and wind energy. This is because Australia is one of the sunniest continents in the world, and we have expansive land space as well as an advanced economy, which makes up a pretty good recipe for expanding solar and wind farms. In 2020, 6.5% of total electricity generated in Australia was from solar power. That was 23.5% of the total clean energy generated. Solar energy is especially effective on a small scale, such as through the over 3 million households in Australia, which have rooftop solar panels installed. Yet the biggest challenge with expanding solar energy is that it is not always reliable, given that the sun is not always shining. However, research and development into battery storage of solar energy is improving to hopefully eventually fully overcome this issue. Wind energy, on the other hand, is the leading source of clean energy in Australia, accounting for almost 10% of total electricity generated in 2020 and 35.9% of total clean energy generated. It is currently the cheapest source of large-scale renewable energy. So let's look at Victoria's Renewable Energy Action Plan, which demonstrates a progressive policy for expanding renewable energy and has been praised by environmentalists, including Al Gore. The plan was launched in 2017 and pledged $146 million in funding to increase renewable energy generation to 40% by 2025. It emphasized an expansion of wind power especially, and predicted key economic benefits too, such as creating 11,000 new jobs. In the 2020 to 21 Victorian budget, the action plan was backed by $1.6 billion in funding. Expanding policies such as this one will be an important solution for mitigating climate change. Next, another key element of climate action, which our group has researched specifically, is the protection of biodiversity. The environmental impact of climate change causes damage to ecosystems and threatens the extinction of many varieties of wildlife and plants. Simultaneously, this threatens the pollination process, which is integral to agricultural production and food output. So therefore, one climate action solution is the development and expansion of green spaces, such as parks and nature strips in urban areas. This works to protect biodiversity and reverse this threat to food sources by creating spaces for wildlife to thrive. Importantly, at the same time, there are copious other environmental, social, and economic benefits, including, for example, improved air quality, mitigation of the heat island effect, which is pictured here on the right, and plenty of psychological benefits to well-being. Finally, as individuals, there are many actions we can take to minimize our own carbon footprint and fight climate change. Our team has developed 3 of these infographics here, displaying individual ways to address climate change, and you can see them on our website at ACET-Global/Global Climate Action Project. I'll go through them briefly now. So first, important individual climate action includes changing our dietary habits. The meat and dairy sector are one of the most significant contributors to climate change by reducing your consumption of animal protein by half, and by switching to a plant-rich diet, you can cut your diet's carbon footprint by more than 40%. Secondly, reduce your food waste. This not only avoids greenhouse gas emissions, which come from green waste decomposing in landfill, but also reduces the demand for new raw materials and therefore reduces emissions from the energy that goes into growing, producing, and transporting that food. Number 3, eat local and seasonal food. This again avoids the greenhouse gas emissions released from transporting food over a large distance. 4, compost your green waste. At least half of waste in residential garbage bins is compostable, but ends up in landfill instead. Composting decreases greenhouse gas emissions and helps restore essential nutrients to the soil. So a win-win. Finally, number 5, choose organic food. Organic farms use less fertilizer and avoid chemicals, proving to be safer for the surrounding environment. And at the same time, research has shown that on average, organic farms fund and support local biodiversity more than traditional farms. As individuals, we can also make a difference by adopting renewable energy where possible, such as through installing rooftop solar panels, and also by optimizing our travel style. For one, cars are highly energy-intensive means of transportation. Instead, you could try alternatives such as walking, biking, using public transport, and carpooling or ride-sharing as ways to reduce your climate impact by minimizing your carbon emissions. Also, avoid flying when possible. By cutting out just one transatlantic flight each year, Individually, we would save 1.6 tonnes of carbon emissions, which is predicted to be the equivalent of one person recycling for 20 years. Pretty crazy. So in addition to these, there are many, many other actions we can take as individuals to reduce our contribution to climate change. These actions can vary from having a small impact, such as upgrading our home's light bulbs to more energy efficient ones, to having a large impact, such as living car-free, or most impactful of all, having one fewer child. If you're interested, you can calculate the impact you're having on the climate by calculating your carbon footprint at a website like this one. But overall, doing our part to protect the environment and mitigate climate change through large and small actions all adds up, and it's important for protecting our future. Finally, conceptualizing the gravity and scale of topics like climate change can be difficult. And as individuals, we can sometimes feel overwhelmed. I definitely do sometimes. Eco-anxiety is the worry about current and future harm to the environment caused by human activity, and it's something you may feel or encounter at some point. There are resources online to help with this, including from Psychologists for a Safe Climate and from the Australian Conservation Foundation that can all help provide perspective when encountering these feelings. It's important, though, to remind ourselves of the real power of individual action, because through everyday choices, you can actively help in mitigating the impacts of climate change. Through not only reforming your own actions to reduce your personal carbon footprint, but by also consciously exercising our consumer power and democratic voting power, we can support others who support the planet. The earth we live on is home to us all, and we should all be conscious of the impact we leave for not only us, but those around us and for those to come. So thank you for listening, and I hope that from this presentation you learn a bit more about climate action and the importance of mitigating climate change. We encourage you to look at resources on our website and online, and to further educate yourselves and others by discussing these important topics with those around you. If you'd like to intern at ACET-Global and contribute towards research on our CSR projects, including the Global Climate Action Project that you saw here today, please reach out to us through our email on our website. We would love to have you. Thanks.